Good afternoon, Catalina Rotarians. While you're finishing up, we're going to get started with today's agenda. And first, we'd like to welcome any visiting Rotarians who are with us. Jeff, would you like to stand up and?
I'm Jeff Hotchkiss with the Boy Scouts of America. Oh, hello. I'm now a lounge singer. I'm Jeff Hotchkiss with the Catalina Council Boy Scouts of America, visiting from the downtown Tucson Club.
And do we have any guests among us today? Are other Rotarians?
Actually, I'm going to introduce a former Rotarian, Dave Gallagher, because he resigned July 31st in the Tucson Club. Yeah. And let's see, he's known as Susan Gallagher's husband. That's how most people talk about him. He is a part-time fly fisherman, a recovering commercial real estate broker, and he likes to quail hunt. And he is also Maria Elena McElroy's next door neighbor. And he's my friend, and he is going to, I think, apply for membership here in Catalina Club. So welcome, Dave Gallagher.
No sooner does Tom sit down than he gets to come back up and make an announcement.
Thanks for all the enthusiasm. It's a shame I'm not the sergeant today, because I've heard about 2 trips and all that stuff today. So if there's a sergeant, I can rat on somebody. I just want to talk a little bit about sponsorships for the district conference. You know, we're very lucky in that we have our district governors from our club, and we have some sponsorship opportunities available. I spoke here a couple of weeks ago, and thank you, club, for stepping up. And we are a silver sponsor, Catalina Rotary. So that means that I think 10 people put a leg up. And so if anybody else wants to do it, you can be a friend of Rotary for $100, all the way up to a platinum sponsor and anything in between. If you elect to do this, you got to remember that you're going to get great collateral advertising in the circular, on the website, etc. And Rotarians do business with other Rotarians, and you will join other members of the Catalina Rotary Club that have stepped up, including a silver sponsor from Hamstra Heating and Cooling. Thank you, Jeff. And coincidentally, he signed up for that silver sponsor the day I signed the paperwork for my silver service plan with Hamstra Heating and Cooling. So anyway, thank you very much. Look at that, he's turning red. Pat Egbert, attorney at law, Irv Mendez, Tom Robertson, Presidio Group Wealth Management. So if anybody else would like to, you know what? Thank you very much. I was thinking about shaming you into it. Thank you for raising your hand. That's right, exactly. And so now we have Firehouse Subs as a sponsor as well. So thank you very much, Joanne. Anybody else wants to step up? Love to. And we have a little bit of a competition going with Tucson Club, so step up.
Well, Tom, how are we doing so far against the Tucson Club?
Right now, yeah, they are. Well, it depends on individual sponsors. We're not, but they're about $300 or $400 up on us.
You're gonna keep us apprised of that as we go, right? We will not lose, will we?
I would like to welcome everyone on Zoom, and a reminder, we're Zooming today and we will be Zooming again Friday, August 19th, but we will not be Zooming next week. The district conference Tom Robertson was talking about is September 23rd to the 25th at Casino del Sol here in Tucson. We will be an active participant at this year's conference. And just exactly what that activity is yet to be, I have yet to be informed of our volunteering. But you can sign up on the district's website and through a link on our wagon wheel each week. And we hope to see an awful lot of people at the district conference. On your table, there are some sheets that you can fill out if you haven't emailed me yet. The big idea presentations, as if you got your email from me, will be held on Monday, August 22nd at Integrative Touch. There's at their place up on North Oracle. And on Tuesday, August 23rd at Yodo at their new location on Country Club. And that information is in the email I sent out. And it's also on the forms here. And I would just like to be in a position to let them know how many of us to expect on Monday and or on Tuesday. Thank you. Yes, Tony.
Regarding the Yodo presentation, I got this week. Hey, Tony, hold on.
Anybody planning to attend the Yodo presentation on August
23rd,
23rd
Tuesday.
should be advised that the building is not completed. It's under construction and the AC is not functional. So dress appropriately. If you come in a three-piece suit or, not non-summer business attire, you'll be pretty uncomfortable. So just know that we're going to be showing you the building and the building's not done.
I'd like to thank everybody who came out last week to Finney's Landing for our social event. We had 21 people there, including some of the youngest Rotarians in our club, thanks to BJ. So that was a great evening. And again, thank you. We'll be doing this again at the end of August 26th, I think 25th. At Tucson Hop Shop at Dodge and Fort Lowell. More information on that in the next couple of weeks. And now I'd like to welcome up with one of the greatest jackpots of all time, Pablo with Queen of Hearts.
Hello. All right, so we have our pot at $4,775. We still have 20 cards left, and I have the winner who's going to select not the Queen of Hearts because we want to keep it going. And I don't know how this winner is going to do it because all communication is going to go haywire, but Steve, where is he? Oh. You're right in front of me. It's you. You gotta take a picture of yourself. You gotta do a selfie. All right. No, I don't think that one. 10 of diamonds. And it keeps coming. All right. Well, the new link should be hopefully up soon, and just keep buying those raffle tickets and keep bringing up that raffle so I can win eventually. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for those who haven't had an opportunity to volunteer enough from their wallets, I bring you our Sergeant at Arms today, Joanne Westerman.
Or I guess it
Yeah,
can.
that's all right.
Well, that's all right. I won't walk around. Nah, it's all right. I'll just walk over here and then over here. So I've heard a couple of things at our tables and from Tom Robertson, who wondered who the sergeant is. It's me. And I understand that there's been some traveling going on. Great time of year to be traveling. So let's start with, well, shall we start with Steve Pender since you're the man of the minute? And I know you had a trip back to New York, I believe.
Yes, well, we set out for a vacation that was divided into three parts. First was going to be about 5 nights in New York City. And we had a great time in New York, which we always do. And we're from that area. And then we were going to visit with my mom for about 4 days, visit with Helena's family for 4 days. The second morning after we left New York, we both came down with COVID. So I don't recommend doing that, especially when you're on vacation. And so as you can imagine, it pretty much trashed the rest of the of our trip. Luckily, Helena had absolutely no symptoms, and I had enough for both of us. Still have a lingering cough, but almost back to 100%. So I'll put something in the can, because the silver lining is that we didn't get any of our family and friends sick. So we're thankful for that.
Oh, that is good.
Yeah.
I was just going to wonder out loud if COVID offsets the fine for the vacation, but you've handled that nicely. So we'll let that go. I think back at the back table, I heard about a rumor that there were some vacation talks going on back there. Anyone? Bueller? Anyone? Pat Egbert.
Of course, I had talked about it prior to the trip. So all the club already knows about it. So all I can talk about is what it's like after the trip.
But did you pay a fine
I did.
before?
I did pay a fine, but
Oh, good. You get the double jackpot
I
fine.
get
Woohoo.
double whammy. That's right. Candy and I took our granddaughters to La Jolla Shores, and we spent a short week in the waves and walking on the beach and enjoying the temperature. It was COVID affected that too. My granddaughter had just come back from Mexico, and we should find her. And she got COVID, but it was, so she had to come late. You know, we were planning on taking him out with us, but her father, my son-in-law, brought him out, and they spent Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday with us out there. So it was great. And I'll put something in the can.
Wow. Yeah. COVID gets around. Thank you. Kirk?
2 wonderful weeks in Chautauqua, New York. Concerts, lectures, and especially new friends. One of my new friends is a blind woman, totally blind from birth, has a dog named Wasabi. She says, gate 6, and the dog takes her to the right gate at the airport.
Wow. She's
Climbed Mount Kilimanjaro 3 times. She's summited all 32, 14er peaks in Colorado. Whatever. Anyway, so I was inspired. On her mountain climb, she had a guy with bear bells on, and she would hear if he would go off to the left or right. Somebody came up to her and said, "What are those bells?" She says, "Oh, I'm blind." He says, "You're blonde?" She says, "No, that's a different disability."
I think he was blonde. Wow. If that doesn't make you feel like an underachiever, I don't know what will. Very good. Let's see. BJ, I see BJ in the back.
Tom was trying to get me to fess up for something I already paid for a couple months ago. So
Again, see how this works? I love that.
but our oldest Nico got his driver's license about a week and a half ago. And yesterday I watched him drive himself to school as I drove the other direction from dropping off the babies. So
Scary. Isn't
that
it?
was scary and joyful and scary some more. I will find myself next week since I already put my cash in the dollar deal earlier. So
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Michael.
I was just a little bit farther south than Pat was. I was down in Coronado playing around for a week with the kids and stuff, checking out. Your sailboat's still there, Tom. Don't worry. Thanks for giving me the keys. No. And yeah, good time. No one got sick, which was good. And the whole ride home, I heard, "Are we there yet?
or how much longer?
Yeah.
And I got a deal on gas, $5.10.
Woohoo.
That was at
Nice.
Costco.
Very nice. Yeah. Ouch. Yowza. Who else in the room? Tom?
Yeah, so just a quick happy buck. So the other day we put our fourth child, second generation into kindergarten at Fruit Tendler, and she did great. Her dad was kind of choked up, but looking around that that crowd there, the kids were doing great, and half the parents were crying. I couldn't believe it.
Very typical. How about Zoomers? Do we have anybody Zooming that has a happy buck or anything to confess? Not today? Okay, you guys are off the hook. I will throw in my little trip that we did, because the last time I was here since then, but we didn't have Sergeant that day. I went to Hawaii, and it was our good friends and neighbors started this back in May, which was my 70th birthday month. And they said, we're going to take you to Hawaii for your birthday. And I did the big happy dance. And they said, well, not really the whole trip. But they did with their Hilton Hawaiian whatever, or Hilton whatever points, they all the rooms were taken care of. So we went out and bought a new car on that money, but no, just kidding. But anyway, we had a great trip, good flights, all directions. But we did all four come down with COVID after we got back. So woohoo! So that's good. So I'll throw in some money for that. Maria Lane, I see a hand there.
Oops, thank you. I would like to put a wonderful dollar in the can to welcome David Gallagher. I hope that
Yes,
you do join us.
I agree. Tom again. Oh, wait, Sharon, while you're there.
Well, this week we put one grandchild into kindergarten, one grandchild started junior high, and the tough one is we have a high schooler now.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
Lots of fun.
Yep. Yay, congratulations for that. Tom again?
Wait. Where's the money? Give me a mic. Where's the money?
I overpaid. I put in more than $1. You mentioned a new car. Is that the white BMW I saw you leaving the Finney's Landing in
Yeah,
last
but
week?
that's, yeah,
Is
I've
that-
had that for a long time.
Okay,
That's an
it
old.
looked brand new to me. So there you go.
Yeah, well, I take care of my cars. No, it's a 19. It's not new, but thanks for noticing. I was kidding about buying a new car. Is that it, everybody? Oh, right here, Pam.
We had a surprise opportunity. Was it Audrey that was not feeling well and called you and said, we have a Rotaractor coming, and would you be willing to entertain him? So Guillermo met us at Monterey Court last Sunday. It was pouring cats and dogs for part of that evening, but the PD Ronstadt and company still performed. And we turned to Guillermo a couple of times and said, because this family originally came from Mexico, they do about 1/10 of their performances in old traditional Mexican Spanish songs. So as they were playing each one of these songs, I'd turn to Guillermo and say, and it's saying, you know, what's this about? So the first one he said, oh, this is a very sad song, but he wouldn't tell us what the words were. And then a little bit later, he said, oh, this is a happy one. So he is president of his Rotaract Club. He wants to come back and go to one of our club meetings. He was here visiting his grandmother, I think. So we hope that he will return and that he'll come to a club meeting.
Excellent. Very good.
And Audrey has COVID. So she wasn't feeling well
Oh.
because she contracted COVID after her travels.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I tell you. Okay, anything else? All right, I'm out.
One of the great things about Catalina Rotary is how we can shift gears. You may have seen in the wagon wheel this week a little information on Thomas Bogart and JTED. And I want you to remember that, because in a few weeks, when Thomas is here to talk to us, you're going to want to remember that you read his bio in the wagon wheel. The bio you didn't get a chance to read this week was that of Dr. Jamie Gallagher from Tucson Water. And here to tell us more is our own Sharon Chesser.
Well, you're in for a treat. In keeping with Andy's theme and challenge, what do you know about Tucson? We are very excited today that we are going to hear about the future, the long-range plan at Tucson Water, something that affects everybody in the room. Our speaker has been in Tucson about 20 years. She and her husband came out from upstate New York. So she identified with what you were saying, Kirk, about your vacation, for sure. They have 2 children, a daughter in 3rd grade and a son in 5th grade at Dreckman School, which is great. She started her career at the U of A in climate and various scientific studies related to water, and then gravitated to the mayor's, our previous mayor's office on his team. And for about the last 4 years has held the position of lead planner, public information and conservation office at Tucson Water. One of her hobbies is sewing and assisting her daughter with the love of horses. And so let's give a roaring Catalina welcome, please, to Jamie Gallagher, please.
We really appreciate the invite and your flexibility with us. I'm glad we were able to switch out. Sure. All right, let's try and do this without squeaks or pops. Great. Okay. So I just really appreciate this opportunity because I have always been a little curious about your organization. It's great to learn more. It's great to meet all of you. As Sharon said, I am the lead planner with Tucson Water, and I work in our Public Information and Conservation Office. So our program also hosts the education program that you might be familiar with. We have 2 partners that go out into area schools and do presentations about Tucson Water and how to conserve water. So if you have any questions about that, happy to answer those as well. But I'm here today to talk about One Water 2100, which is a long-range planning about every 10 years or so. So we were due for a refresh on our outlook. And One Water is a philosophy that has been widely adopted across the world by water utilities. And I'll explain a bit about that as well. So the gist of it is we take an integrated approach to water resource management. So this next slide shows our One Water wheel, and that shows the 4 water resources we have here in Tucson. And One Water is about integrating the management of those water resources. So instead of, just silos for each one of these approaches, that we're managing them in an integrated way. And all of these water sources have value. Are you having trouble getting to the next one? Oh, sorry. That's right. You told me that and I forgot. And I don't even know where to point it, but I'm going to zoom over there. There we go. Okay. All right. This was my fault. I'm sorry. So we have here in Tucson, we have surface water from the Colorado River delivered via the Central Arizona Project. We're also one of the first cities in the country to do recycled water or reclaimed water for large irrigation customers. Groundwater is our historic water resource. And more recently, we're harvesting rain and storm water to help use a little less potable water on our landscapes. So these are our water resources here in Tucson. I'll go through each one. So from the Colorado, we get our drinking water. And we only have been using about 2/3 of our annual allocation. We're the largest customer for the Central Arizona project. When it started, Tucson was able to get a fairly large allocation. And because we do such a good job of managing our demand, we only use 2/3 of it and store the remaining third. We've accumulated about 5 years worth of savings because of that. And as you know, everyone's familiar, we are facing a very severe situation on the Colorado. We're in a tier 1 drought status this year. Next year, we will be going into tier 2 because of the projections. And now we're very fortunate that our allocation does not get cut in those 2 tiers, but this is a constantly changing situation, as you've seen in the news. Mayor and council are actively negotiating about our allocation with other partners to try and keep as much water in the reservoirs as possible for a lot of different reasons. But the main one of late that's been a big focus is just keeping the hydropower going in the reservoirs and at the dams. So recycled water, like I said, we were one of the first cities in the country to use this as a resource, add this to our portfolio. That's back when we were completely dependent on groundwater. So before we got the Central Arizona project, we started reducing our demand by recycling wastewater, treating it up to a standard that we could put into a completely separate distribution system, the purple pipe system, and send out to large irrigation customers like golf courses, schools, and parks. So that's helped reduce our demand. And then most recently, we've added storm and rainwater capture. We've been doing a residential rebate for rainwater harvesting for, let's see, about 5 or 6 years, I think it is. And the past couple years, we've been doing neighborhood scale stormwater harvesting. So your neighborhood association could apply to get rain or stormwater harvesting basins put in the right of way, and we would come out and build that for you and then help you maintain it. And it's a way to support landscapes like this. So native landscapes, native trees, help increase the tree canopy without necessarily increasing our use of water. Because long-term, the hope is that these types of plants would be able to exist just on the rainwater that's being harvested. So groundwater, our last water resource, again, that's the supply that we used to be completely dependent on. There was a point in time in which we were the largest city in the United States that was completely dependent on groundwater. And those groundwater levels were sinking because of how much we were withdrawing. We were able to turn that around with these other water resources by diversifying our supply portfolio and reducing our demand. But this is still very important to us because the state mandates that we had to bring those levels back up, bring the aquifer into balance, that we're withdrawing as much as we're putting in. And we've been able to do that, but it's also where we store those savings. So the important thing about groundwater for us now is that it's our long-term savings account for water. So that's why it's an important part of the mix still. And this chart kind of ties all of that together. So this is our historic water production chart going back to 1940. It was the dark blue is groundwater. So that shows how we're completely dependent on that. And those were the post-World War boom years where the community was really growing. Our demand was growing as well. But being completely dependent on groundwater, we were drawing those levels down. And then we started adding, like I said, the reclaimed water into the mix. The teal is something I didn't talk about. That's the water we treat in our aquifer. So our water treatment at the TARP plant, that's the plume from the airport that we're treating. We added that into the mix. And then when we started getting those supplies from the Colorado River, that's the light blue. And then at the very top where it's really hard to see, that is the rain and stormwater harvesting. Now that water is not metered, so that's just an approximation of how much of that water is in our system. But we've been working on trying to measure that better. The neat thing about this graph to me, because I work in conservation, is how we've been able to bend the demand curve. So starting in the early 2000s, our demand has actually gone down despite the fact that our population is still growing. So right now we're using about as much water as we did in the early 90s, despite the fact that our population has grown significantly over that time. So all of that's allowed us, again, to save that third of our allocation of Colorado River water and invest in our long-term resilience as a community. So these are, to me, the three main pillars of our water security here in Tucson, and what makes us really unique in all of the desert Southwest is that we have a diverse array of water resources that not every community has. We manage those in an integrated way, valuing the importance of all those water resources, and ensuring that we're constantly working to reduce our reliance on the Colorado River water, which is really precious because it comes from so far, by really managing our demand. We have one of the oldest conservation programs in the country, as well as one of the oldest recycled water programs in the country. And because of this community's conservation ethic, we've really succeeded at managing the per person use that's the typical measure for conservation programs. And now we have among the lowest per capita use of water in the Southwest. And we're always looking to the future and always planning to the future to really, we take this drought very seriously, and we're always looking to improve on what we've established so far. We're lucky that we have this savings and this resilience in Tucson, but we've always got to be careful about our water use here in the desert. So this is the timeline for our master plan. We have been working over the past few years to set the foundation and do an existing conditions analysis on our system, on our supply and demand. Looking at the long-term population growth and where in the community water is going to be used and where it comes into the system and how to get it across the system. Last year and this year, we've really been starting to work with the public. So last year we did a scenario planning process that I'll explain a bit more. And this year we're just about to launch on August 16th our big public campaign to get public feedback on this master plan. And I'll explain that as well. So what we're looking to do is get help on the strategies that we can use to build on our water resilience, get people more familiar with the One Water approach and how it's led to our current state, and then build on that for the future. Then we'll take this plan to mayor and council in 2023 and start implementing it in 2024. So scenario planning is a process that we're using, which is kind of unique. Not every long-range plan effort does that, but it's to look at different futures that could happen. So there's a lot of different things affecting water in our community. We're trying to look at all of them and look at different futures that could happen and mitigate the risks in the futures we want to avoid and build on the practices that get us to the future we want to go towards. So a more sustainable, resilient future for the community. As water planners, we tend to work in a tone of what's probable. We have these kind of blinders about the data we have and the way we see the system. But we need to work with the public to really fully understand what's plausible, to understand what everybody is concerned about, and to make sure they really know what's happening with the investment they've made in this system and how to build on its successes and avoid any risks. Okay, so we came up through the scenario planning we did last year, we came up with these 8 drivers. So these are the main categories of risk that we identified with a group of stakeholders through a series of workshops. They were most concerned, and these are ranked in order of concern. So they were most concerned about water supply changes, most concerned about water demand changes and managing our demand. How resilient is our system to what's happening on the Colorado? How educated is our community? Will we continue to invest in those education programs? Very concerned about equity and affordability as well. a lot of questions about how government and policy regulations will affect our system and us here in Tucson. There's this growing concern and awareness of the water energy nexus. So like I mentioned, a big concern on the Colorado is keeping enough water in those reservoirs to keep the hydroelectric systems going. But it's also important to know how much energy it takes to get water to Tucson. The Central Arizona project pumps water uphill the entire length of it. And that's a lot of energy. It's just over half the energy that's used in the state is to get that water all the way down to here to Tucson, to other communities as well. But it's a significant amount of the energy used in Arizona. And of course, water deeply affects our economic viability. So these are the features that group came up with. The sustainable oasis is where we want to go, and the thirsty desert is what we want to avoid. So the axes here are increases and decreases in demand and increases and decreases in supply. But we noted that as increased portfolio diversification. So not only do we want to increase supply, it's important to people where that supply comes from. A lot of folks, as you can well imagine, do not see us continuing to have such a large allocation of Colorado River water after the next series of negotiations happen. So they were very concerned about having more local control over our water supplies. And that's what that means is more reclaimed water, more rain and stormwater harvesting, and that it's very likely we may become again more dependent on our groundwater resources. So in the sustainable oasis, we have a higher percentage of locally developed and controlled supplies, and we're still decreasing demand. And that's why that sustainable oasis is the future that we want to work towards. And in the thirsty desert, we have both increased demand and decreased resources. And that's what we want to avoid. The ones on the side, it's important to go through this whole range of futures, but basically in counting buckets, that was a future they imagined in which we were more like California, where there's a lot of regulations around water and people are very careful about water management and use. Still not, where we're at, and not exactly a desirable future, but a possible one. And then desert oasis is where we've got an increase in supply, but we still aren't doing a good job of managing demand. So you can see why that top left one is where folks wanted to see us go. So these are the goals of the master plan process, is to get that broad feedback, which we've started with the scenario planning, but we'll do even further with a big public campaign starting on August 16th. Increase the awareness among the community of this approach and our pre-existing resilience that we want to build on. Build on those outcomes that we just looked at, those future scenarios, and they started a list of ways to work towards that future. And then we're going to do this big survey in the fall where those strategies and mitigation options have been developed even further. And then we have people rank them so that we have a prioritized list of those strategies. And then that's what we're going to build the plan off of. And that's what we're going to take to mayor and council. So this is just a summary of those deliverables, is that we're going to conduct this research. It's very important to mayor and council that our engagement is diverse, that it's truly reflective of our population here in Tucson. And it's not just the typical people that we hear from with water concerns, that we're really reaching out and doing a good job of getting feedback. So we've developed this whole communication plan to do that. And like I said, it starts with a town hall on Tuesday, August 16th at the TCC. And then these are just more about those deliverables. We start with that town hall, and then we're going to do another series of workshops to really establish those mitigation options and strategies, basically just strategies and actions that go into the survey. So that will be a series of workshops that we do this fall. And then this is my last slide. These are the times we go to mayor and council. So we took our community engagement campaign to them in July. They approved it. We'll go back over the holidays with the outcomes from this campaign. And then we'll have the first draft in September and then seek approval of the draft that incorporates their edits towards the end of next year. So that's the game plan for One Water. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Oh,
You have lived here forever, you know, rush out to see the water, the runoff water from the Rincons and the Catalinas and so forth when it rains. Seems like an awful lot of water. Does that runoff have any bearing on, I wasn't quick enough to see your map. It may have explained this, but have any bearing on our groundwater? Where does that water go? And what impact does it have on our system?
yeah, that's a great question. So there is some natural recharge from the Catalinas and primarily because that's the biggest kind of water capturing range. But it's a very tiny percentage of what we're allotted by the state. So the Groundwater Act of 1980 that was passed when the canal was being constructed says that it set up an active management area for Tucson. And then it says all of the water providers in each active management area have to submit a plan each year that says what they're, I'm sorry, not each year, but it's a certain, that might be on a 10-year timescale too. It's a certain number of years. You have to say how much water you're getting from the ground, right? So part of it is called incidental recharge. And that's what you're describing is what we get from storms that actually infiltrates through the rivers, down through the soil and into the aquifer. But it's a very small amount. It's you know, I'm just guessing here, but I think it's only 5% of our annual allocation of water. That's why protecting those groundwater levels is so important because we don't get a lot of natural recharge. They seem like big storms. They're awesome to witness, but it just doesn't end up being a lot of water. A lot of it flows actually northward through the rivers and just continues infiltrating as it moves north and gets out of our aquifer.
Lots of questions. So do you guys, in your capacity as a group there with the City Department of Water, do you ever sit around and just spin ideas about what's going to happen 100 years from now and how we're going to get our water 100 years from now?
Yeah, definitely. And that's when I was talking about that one graph where we tend to have blinders as water planners because we know that we're always looking forward and always trying to make sure that we're meeting that future supply and those future demands. And we've been very fortunate to be able to do that here in the desert and have a big growing community. But what's interesting are the conversations around groups that challenge us on that, right? Like we're not water. There's groups in the community that say we should only be using the rainwater that we get. We should limit our demand to what falls from the sky every year because that's more sustainable to these groups than importing water all the way from the Colorado. And that's a really challenging question. You know, so we'll have conversations like that about like, you know, there's of course people are like, that's crazy and totally not possible, but it challenges us. And that's important. I think it's, you know, it's great that we're in a community where we have people that are really at all ends of the spectrum, right? Because then you've got people that are also like, we'll never run out of water and it doesn't matter. I don't even have to think about it. And that's not necessarily true either, but it's great to have those conversations like you're describing and try to play through like, well, what happens if we do get cut off from the Colorado? And then there's people in the room that are like, well, that'll never happen because they're not just going to cut off Arizona. They would have to cut off, you know, there's 7 states that pull water from the Colorado River. So what happens with the other states? Would they get cut off too? And so it's always, there's a lot of interesting conversations, but we're just one player in that whole watershed. And that's the reassuring thing to me is that all of those players have to agree to whatever happens next in the Colorado. Yes, there's less, And we have to acknowledge that. But we're all working really hard to do that. And at least we have a seat at the table. And it's very unlikely that they're going to say, no more water just for Tucson or just for Arizona. Everybody is going to have to take a cut, but hopefully it'll happen in a way that there aren't any real losers, that everybody's working together to manage their demand.
I have a question about our share of the Colorado. A few weeks ago, we had a presentation here from a commercial real estate developer who was talking about some grand plans the private sector has, not only near the airport, but more importantly, as the Colorado is reflected in the Casa Grande area. And they're talking about semiconductor plants. They're talking about electric car plants, battery plants. These are really water intensive industries. And, most people in this room are really all about economic development, but those guys are upstream from us. So how does all that threaten our share, our allocation of the Colorado? And, how can we keep from getting cut off? I mean, aside from, the drought we're going through, there's some commercial pressures and money talks.
Yeah. So that's where it's really important to understand. It's helpful to know what each water provider has in terms of resources. So up in Phoenix, they have the Salt River project too. So they have the Salt River and the Colorado, and they also encourage those chip plants to reuse as much of their own water as possible. So on-site reuse for these large manufacturing or industrial customers is going to become increasingly important. And if yes, yeah. Well, no, it all could be a net increase in the amount of water that's needed. It's just. Well, what's going to change our allocation is the outcome from a process called the Arizona Reconsultation Committee. So when the Colorado was originally split up with the Bureau of Reclamation, that was an agreement that's sunsetting at the end of 2025. So there's active negotiations right now for renewing everybody's share of the Colorado. So all 7 states are at the table. Our seat is the Arizona Reconsultation Committee, but the same is happening in every state. And that's what's going to determine each state's share. And then the Central Arizona Project is one part of Arizona's share. And then Tucson is just one part of the Central Arizona Project's share. So we're lucky that we have a seat at that table. Our previous director, Tim Tamir, is our representative for the city of Tucson on that committee. And he just does the best job he can to represent us in our future in that process. And what he keeps saying is that everybody has to give up something, and everybody's going to try. It's in everybody's interest to make it fair, so that way we have an agreement that we can take to the feds so they're not deciding for us. So that's what they're all working really hard to do. And it'll be a very different agreement than the original one was back in, I can't remember when the original, I think it was in 1920 when they started taking shares of the Colorado. So it's, we have much different data. It's a much different situation. But we have the tools already here to succeed. Oh, I'm sorry. I think there was someone else from this table. Yeah.
Oh. This would be out of your area authority, but I live in county, not in Tucson. And as far as I know, I'm being surcharged for my water. Can you speak to the fairness of that? Because I have no choice or control over that matter.
It's called a differential rate, and it has been very controversial. I am not involved in our finance area or, and it was really a mayor and council decision.
Which I have no.
Right, because you don't get to vote for, right. Yeah. What I'm aware of is that we were one of the few cities in the state that did not have differential rates, that it's a very common practice, that it does cost more to serve farther out parts of our service area. And Tucson Water is one of those strange utilities where we don't just serve in the city, we serve outside the city, in some cases very far outside the city. Yeah. Yep. So it's and then how those funds are used is a whole nother series of discussions. And it's being litigated. I mean, it's in the court system. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But the main thing that we are often told is that this is a common practice. We are very late to the table in doing it. And I know. But yeah. I know. I'm sorry.
When I moved to Tucson 11 years ago, people said, you are so fortunate to be here compared to Phoenix for many reasons, one of which was water usage. They told me when I moved here, their usage is double per capita as Tucson. And I just wonder, why are we so much better and how can we help those poor folks up north?
The two main things that I'm aware of is us having been completely dependent on groundwater. Phoenix was never completely dependent on groundwater. They've had the Salt River project for a long time. So that additional water source has made them less concerned about demand management than we had to be. Like there was a point, a lot of you probably were here for it. I was not, where, there was subsidence, there were cracks in the ground. It was scary, I'm sure. So I think that we had to manage our demand. The other thing was we couldn't meet our demand when we did the Pete the Beat campaign. Some of you might remember, it's because we could not meet peak demand. That's what TEP is advertising right now, is to try and get us to use less energy during peak hours. Because we couldn't, when people came home and started watering their lawns and all kinds of stuff, we couldn't actually provide enough water. So it was less expensive to do like a big campaign, like we all got to get together and reduce our demand, than it was to start building huge pipes. And we couldn't even do that fast enough. So we got on that game a lot sooner and started turning the tide, like I showed in that one graph. And we've just continued to do that because our community is so conscientious about water. There's even more reason to do it now because of what's going on in the Colorado. We switched out our landscapes. A lot of people in Phoenix didn't. It's a whole series of things, but it's the community invests in it. That's a fee you pay on your water bill, is for the conservation program. And we just try to really make it work.
Can I ask a question? I'm not sure of the accuracy of this information, so that's what I'm checking on. My impression is that the Imperial Valley in California is outside of this whole negotiating process, that they have something that goes back even further, and that they don't have any restrictions on the money, on the water that's going into that huge agricultural area. And some TV channels have also been recently publicizing that farmers will grow just to keep their allotment, not that the crops that they're growing is necessary, profitable, or needed, but they don't want to lose their little chunk. Can you address that?
Unfortunately, I don't know anything about that. I do know that the Imperial Valley was a holdout on the drought contingency plan, which was the last big negotiation on the Colorado. That's where we got that tier 1, 2, and 3 system from. That was signed in 2019. They were the last. They were threatening to not let the whole thing pass because they were holding out on their allotment. So yeah, they clearly have sway, and I'm not exactly sure why. It might be what you're alluding to, but I just can't speak to it, unfortunately. It's interesting though, huh? No.
Paul Bennett has a question. Paul, if you want to.
Is one of the things you're looking at following, there's been talk over the years, Bureau of Reclamation and maybe a desal plant bringing in water down by Yuma, or somehow getting California off some of the Colorado water since they're closer, but a secondary supply.
We are not looking at desal as a utility. Other agencies, organizations are, but that's not something, we don't have a oceanfront property here in Tucson. So that's not something that we're looking at, but other people in the other Colorado River water users certainly are.
I know it's been a long discussion with the Bureau trying to do something down by Yuma, then bring it back up to this way. So.
Yeah. The only thing I know about desalination is how energy intensive it is. That is one of the most that's probably the most energy intensive water resource on the planet, like how much energy it takes to treat that water. We can treat recycled water with less energy, treating wastewater. We can treat brackish water. There are areas along the Central Arizona project here in Arizona where it's just slightly brackish water, and that could be treated and put into the canal. That's a discussion that the canal managers have with some communities. So it's something always people jump to, but there's a lot of cost and a lot of energy associated with it. And then a lot of waste. Then you have all the salt waste.
Yeah. You have a couple people in the club that used to work for wastewater.
Oh, so you probably know more about it than I do.
We've got time for one. Tom?
So there's an article in the paper 6 months or so ago, showed surface temperatures in Tucson, and it broke it down into economic areas. And it said that, pointed out that lower economic areas in Tucson, the surface temperature is several degrees warmer. And the reason why is because they don't water. Okay. Other areas of town where they water, they have more grass canopy, et cetera. And just anecdotally, when you drive onto Davis-Monthan Air Force Base now, if you see a blade of grass out there, take a picture and send it to me. They have cut off the water to everything. And I guess my question is how do you plan for, okay, let's cut the water off and conserve, but when we do that, we got these other problems that crop up. I know you do. Yeah.
I completely agree with you. I think that with the xeriscaping that we may have gone too far, and especially just our quality of life in Tucson and the way our community looks. There's a lot to be said for having, not perhaps lush green grass everywhere, but a little more effort in the landscaping. Yeah. So that's why we really focus on in those more vulnerable parts of our community. We have special, you can do a rainwater harvesting system for free. We have a grant to do rainwater harvesting in the more vulnerable neighborhoods. The Storm to Shade program that does the stormwater, the larger basins in the right of way, they're focusing in those communities. The mayor's tree effort is focusing in those communities to try and do more canopy in those areas, but to do it in a way that doesn't necessarily increase our consumption of potable or river water, in a way where we're using either reclaimed or that harvested water so that it doesn't increase our consumption. But yeah, I totally agree that it's something we got to focus on, but to do it in a way that doesn't increase our water consumption is the challenge.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. I think you can tell that this is a topic that's near and dear to everyone here who's ever enjoyed an ice cube. So thank you. I want to, on behalf of Catalina Rotary, and the #1 effort for Rotary International is the eradication of polio. So in honor of your talk and in thanks, we're going to inoculate 25 children against polio as we hope to finally beat this scourge worldwide. Also, we'd like you to have this little pin, which is the theme pin for this year on one side. And on the other side is the 4-way test of the things Rotarians think, say, and do, as another thank you for your time today. And if you're going to be willing to stick around a little bit after, I bet there are some more questions bubbling out there. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Next week, we have Stephen Fleming from the University of Arizona, who's going to update us on Tucson's place in space. So we hope that you'll be here next week. And if you'll all join me now, we will close our meeting with the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you to the Zoom team. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to everyone. Enjoy your weekend.